Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll have the initial public comment. We do have a public hearing for each agenda item, but this initial public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 3 minutes to speak. If an agenda item is also listed as a public hearing, persons may wait to speak until that particular item. Anyone wishing to speak during the initial public comment? Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the initial public comment. Item number 1 for possible action, approval of the minutes of the September 18th, 2019 regular meeting.
Move. Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2 for possible action, variance V-19-642 Boulder Landing, BC number 65, Boulder Landing Village HOA. Susan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boulder Landing is a condominium subdivision with homes that are attached townhome style side to side. The subdivision consists of 30 units. 19 were built by the first developer, 10 were built by a second developer, and one separate unit remains unbuilt at this time. For condominiums, the individual owners own their unit, but the association as a whole owns the land, and the association is under control of a governing board, otherwise known as the board of a homeowners association. In this case, the applicant is the board of the association, and they recently began phase 1 of their proposed landscape provisions. But as you'll see from their attachments, even though their master landscape plan, which they've worked on over the last couple of years, anticipated possibly 3 phases of landscape changes, they've pretty much stated they're only going forward with phase 1, and this variance request is only for phase 1. And primarily that phase 1 consists of removing grass between driveway areas of the units, and it also includes removing 4 trees that the board deemed to be problem trees. However, because the city's landscape chapter is very, very old, dating back to the 1980s, it rewards grass over all other ground covers, giving it at least twice as many or more points as any other form of ground cover. And so therefore, if grass is being removed, it, for the most part, will trigger a variance because it's almost impossible to make up the amount of lost points for grass with other additional landscaping. This variance came about as a result of a complaint within the community, which triggered the board coming in and bringing their landscape plans in for staff to evaluate. And essentially, the summary of that is that they're removing about 7,500 square feet of grass and the 4 problem trees. They're going to replacing that with new decorative rock ground cover, 151 new plants, and 11 boulders. But even with that new landscaping in place of the removal of the grass and the few trees, it falls short on points per our adopted landscaping point system in the code. And as the staff report notes, one aspect of the landscaping point system is that it allows the Planning Commission to assign points at its discretion for items such as large rock displays. And there have been a couple previous cases where boulders were proposed at 35 points each, and the Planning Commission approved that. So for the sake of this variance request, this was evaluated, assuming the Planning Commission would also assign 35 points to those boulders. As noted at the beginning of the report, this project was developed in phases, and for the last phase built, that developer also obtained approval of a variance request back in 2001, and that was for landscaping that did not also meet the minimum point requirements and also had fewer trees than required by the code as well. Pursuant to this subdivision, the Southern Nevada Water Authority has already approved the conversion of turf based on the applicant's proposal, and their requirement for the rebate program involves having live plants. They don't want to see grass removed and nothing but rock put in its place. So while the board may reference 50% coverage and things like that, that strictly pertains to the SNWA requirements. It doesn't have anything to do with the city's point requirements. However, I've attended meetings earlier this year of this SNWA, and a new push they're moving forward with that local communities will have to adopt in the future will, in addition to turf restrictions that we already have for single-family developments that we had to adopt, they also want to see preferably elimination of what they consider to be non-functional areas of turf, often medians and along walkways. I mean, basically, their envision of useless turf is if it's only walked on by landscapers, then it's not necessarily serving a purpose. While I'm sure many homeowners might disagree with that, that's their policy at this point. The city will probably have to adopt it, but even so, when that happens, it will only apply to new developments, not, it won't be retroactive to existing developments. And as also noted in the report, these types of landscaping requirements where the point system has to be met applies only essentially to our multifamily and our commercial projects. Single-family neighborhoods do not have to meet any minimum landscape requirements at all. They just are allowed to landscape at their own discretion. The staff report analyzes the 5 criteria that have to be considered for a variance. In order for the Planning Commission to approve the request, you have to find in favor of all 5 of those criteria. So the staff report concludes with alternate findings that could either be used to approve or deny the request. If approved, there's only one standard condition that's proposed, and that would be that the variance approval is based on the information submitted to you tonight. And basically, it doesn't allow for any deviation that would go beyond the scope of the approved variance if that's the action the Planning Commission takes tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring it around for any questions we may have of staff. Anybody, please?
Susan, before they bring this to you, did the association vote on this? It's good with the association? Do they have the approval to do this from the homeowners association?
The board is the applicant, and so the legal framework of a condominium is that the board is tasked with making decisions for the community. So the information that they had submitted to us indicated that they'd been working on their master landscape plan over the last couple of years, that they had provided copies of that to the owners earlier in the summer, but when they proceeded with moving forward with phase 1, and they told me they did that on the basis at the time is when they distributed that information to their 30 households, or I'm not sure if they're including the 30th unbuilt one in any correspondence, but they refer to information being sent to 29 households. And at the time, when they first sent that out, they said they received only a couple of objections, so they moved forward with phase 1, which is a spray to kill the grass, at which point one of the homeowners came forward to the city asking if it was legal for them to do that. And when I explained that it would probably trigger a variance, that's when the board came in. I've met with members of both sides multiple times since then, and the opposition side basically were arguing that the board should ask for a vote of the residents, and I believe just last week or the week before, the board, through their management company, which is technically the applicant on behalf of the board, they did submit a survey to all of the households, or at least the 29, where the people are present, occupying homes. And basically 2/3 of them voted to move forward with removing, the grass for the phase 1 portion only. However, you've gotten recent correspondence that was provided today. Obviously, there is at least one, if not more, of the owners that are objecting to that. It should be pretty obvious to the commission that, and I've expressed this to both sides as well, your job is not to settle an HOA battle. HOAs are often referred to as a fifth level of government, and it's a representative form of government where, the boards are elected by their, residents, and they are tasked with making decisions which they are legally enabled to do. So, hopefully their disagreements can be worked out among themselves without necessarily dragging the city or pursuing this matter beyond what's reasonable. The commission is obligated to make a decision as you would for any other variance on the merits of the request, based on the code that we have in place.
I have one last question. I think this one's for Michael. I know we've talked, this code is so very, very old. Is there any idea when we're going to get this code changed?
Within the fiscal year 1920 budget, we have funding for hiring a consultant that will help us update this code. The goal is to do it before the end of the fiscal year.
And Michael, just to continue on with that, when we do update the landscaping point system, we're going to consult with SNWA, or at least look at their criteria of what they need to see for the conservation easement and try to incorporate that into our landscaping point system?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, my couple of questions here. One was priority of the sign code. Thank you for addressing. To elaborate a little bit more, a comparison of our current code with possibility of variances like this comparative to other municipalities and their code. Do they use a similar point system? Do they value grass in the similar manner? Are we just so archaic that we're behind the power curve that we can't even compare to other municipalities? Can we just elaborate at all on that?
Staff has not recently looked at the other codes over the hill, but I did some years back. And of course, all of the codes over the hill are not from 1980. So their landscape plans are definitely newer. So I would presume that their landscape codes are more cognizant of the fact that we live in the desert, and that grass is obviously not a native, landscape element to the desert. But as to whether or not they use point systems and how complex they are compared to ours, we have not had a chance to evaluate that yet.
Okay. Artificial turf. I know they're already well into the process, but on previous variances we have granted in lieu of grass. Is that something that we can offer the applicant and approve a point system to allow a one-for-one swap for artificial turf in any type of variance, and even allow that as an option?
Well, in a previous variance for the cottages, that was one of the aspects of their request. They actually did not request for a point reduction, but they had requested that points be assigned to boulders, pavers, and limited, small areas of artificial turf. And yes, their request was that the artificial turf be counted at 1 point per square foot as grass would have been. But in terms of your actions tonight, it would be entirely dependent on whether or not the board would be willing to put in artificial turf instead of the rock.
But aside from them being willing, are we able to facilitate and offer that in our discussions at the end of the presentation before we vote? Is that an option that we can use at our discretion?
Well, in effect, you'd be proposing that they use artificial turf instead of the decorative rock that
offer them that the points would be equal, a 1-for-1.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure, since that wasn't part of the variance request, I'm not sure if you could, I'm not sure if that, the only thing.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. If it comes up in discussion,
Yeah.
we'll take it, but that's perfect.
The issue is that since it wasn't proposed, what is written in the staff report is that the Boulder proposal at 35 points each was proposed, and evaluated and is before the commission tonight. I'm just not sure how much flexibility there is to consider other alternatives tonight.
That's fair. I just sometimes we come to compromises and have discussions and can facilitate. I like to know what resources I have. So we'll cross that bridge if we really get to it. And then one last point of clarification, just for our audience, is this variance comes with a contingency that it's based on the plans and maps and everything provided, that they cannot go outside the scope of this variance and this request. Even if they want to remove an additional tree somewhere, if it wasn't captured in this plans, they're not able to deviate. Is that correct?
Basically, they've submitted a proposal that meets a certain amount of points. If the variance gets approved and they end up changing their landscape plan and it achieves at least the same amount or greater number of points, staff would not have a problem with that. For instance, they might choose to replace some of their Mediterranean fine palms, which didn't qualify as a tree because they don't normally meet a 6-foot height at planting. If they want to replace it with other trees, that would count for more points. But also, the deputy city clerk just pointed out to me that apparently artificial turf doesn't qualify for the rebate from SNWA. So it's not likely that the board would want to pursue that option because it would not get them the financial rebate that they would be able to get from SNWA, because SNWA would rather see live plants and, some other rock cover
Makes
other
sense.
than artificial turf.
Makes sense. It'd still be an option. They just wouldn't get the rebate. Any other questions? Yes, circle.
Just for clarification, the water district, when they change their rules, we're going to have to comply with those? Is that what you said? Then our guidelines will have to fit within their guideline parameters
For
landscaping?
Right. They will not get into a lot of detail. It will just simply be, future requirements for limitation of turf. And as I said, it will apply only to future developments. It won't be mandatory to be retroactive to existing developments.
But once we adopt those plans, then anybody that comes along, then those will be what they'll have to comply with, not... If they did change this out, let's say a year from now, we're under those guidelines, they would have to comply with the guidelines that we have in 1 year from now. That's from the water authorities.
When you said, who do you mean by they? The
Us,
city?
us, the
Yes,
city.
yes.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
No other questions of staff. We'll invite the applicant up, someone representing the board. Please come forward, state your name, and present anything that you'd have for us.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Bonicare. I'm representing the board for Boulder Landing, and I just have a little speech here. But the Boulder Landing Village was constructed from 1992 to 2004 and is a small 29-unit townhome community on Lake Mountain Drive. Boulder Landing currently has 10,515 square feet of turf per the SNWA measurements, which is quite a bit of grass. And with the phase 1 of the master landscape plan, we would remove 7,561 square feet, which is a third of the turf behind the garages only, with the Southern Nevada Water Smart landscape program with the drought-tolerant plants, Mediterranean palm trees, decorative rocks, boulders, and updating the very old irrigation system. SNWA rebate is $22,683, which is the $3 times the 7,561 square feet, and would offset 2/3 of our total conversion costs for the phase 1. We have contracted with Cinder Cut Landscape, which is a Boulder City licensed vendor, working with the SNWA to repair and replace 15 to 25-year-old plants, irrigation system, to replace the irrigation system, overgrown bushes, and remove 4 diseased and trip hazard trees. We were able to keep 1 healthy pine where the turf is being removed. SNWA rebate of $22,683 is a lot for a 29-unit HOA. Boulder Landing is additionally adding 75 bushes next to the units and updating the 26 proposed Mediterranean palm trees from a 5-gallon to a 15-gallon, thus increasing the canopy coverage requirement. This variance is required because one owner submitted a complaint to the city. Even though the board approved the Phase 1 landscape plan in August, they still agreed to send out a community vote, which resulted in 19 yes votes, 9 no votes, and 1 non-response. We request this variance so we can continue with Phase 1 turf removal and with the SNWA rebate to be able to replace old water wasting irrigation, update the aged bushes, replace the red granite rock, and add boulders. This will refresh and update the general appearance of our community, as well as be water smart and taking advantage of the SNWA rebate to cover 2/3 of the conversion costs. This would also reduce our monthly landscape contract of $2,500 per year. With the requested Phase 1 turf removal, the Boulder Landing will still have almost 13,000 square feet of turf, or 64% of turf, in our beautiful community. Thank you for your consideration on this matter.
Oh, don't go anywhere.
Oh, sorry, was I supposed to stay up here? Sorry.
We're gonna circle around up here for any questions of the applicant. Any questions? Anything? I've got one, and you may have said it in there. Apologies for my congested head. Projected actual water savings that you guys would have by eliminating turf and using the water smart landscape there. Do you guys have an estimate as to the actual gallons per year that you projected to save?
I don't recall any exact amount of gallon per water we'd be saving. I know that they do have. I'm sorry? Oh,
Please, absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah, one thing, it's kind of awkward to have to.
Sir, we need
Doug
your
Healy-
name.
Doug Healy, 146 Blue Water Drive, Boulder City. It's frustrating to have to comply with the regulations in 1980 when Lake Mead was 130 feet higher, right? And so we're trying to comply with what the Southern Nevada water system is recommending to be water safe. And right now in Green Valley, they've replaced 242,000 square feet of grass turf, saved over 13 million gallons of water each year. So if we replace 500 square feet of water, it's 27,000 gallons a year. So our motivation here is multiple. We have 20,000 square feet of grass. And right now, if you were to build this according to the new standards that are being implied or imposed, it prohibits any grass. So the fact that we have 13,000 square feet is a luxury, in my opinion. Single-family homes now are prohibited from having grass in their front yard. So what we're asking for is something as a community, I think that we think it's important to comply with and being water smart and making it. Unfortunately, it's not an issue within the HOA. There's a handful of people who have dogs, and personally, I think it's selfish to think we need 20,000 square feet of grass in the situation, the desert right now, where we're not allowed to have any grass. So we tried to compromise, take advantage of the rebate, and be water smart and be community minded in this whole thing. So that's basically.
Any other questions for the applicant? No, wonderful. Thank you both.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks.
This is a public hearing. I will open it up. Anyone wishing to speak on this matter, please come forward and state your name. Please.
I guess I'm the only one. My name is Duke Phelps, and I live in Las Vegas, and I'm the 30th unbuilt parcel there, unbuilt home site there. And so I'm here representing me, and I didn't get the information on, but I'm not here in the summer, I'm in Montana, on the survey or the phase 2 or 1 or whatever it was, in reducing the landscaping. So I'm here figuring out what's going on. So my question to Susan and staff is lot 30 or home site 30, is that encompassed in this variance? Is that the way I understand it? I mean, if I look at the map on the back side of the notice here, it's encompassed. It's the only unbuilt site.
No. The variance request pertains to the phase, Holly, can you put up the? The phase one of their landscape program only pertains to the areas in green on that map, which is the areas between existing driveways. So your 30th unit isn't part of the variance request at all.
Well, as you know, or may recall, I have a permits approved for a home to be built there pending a landscape plan. And so are you saying that my landscape plan has to meet the 1980 design guidelines?
You may want to call the office tomorrow. I don't think what you've just stated is correct, because I know when you brought the plans in for your unit, we determined that you alone do not own any land, just as no other owns land. So the city can't force you to landscape anything. And I believe we signed off on, I know, in fact, your permits are ready to be issued. They're just awaiting for you to pay the fees for them. We issued approval, and we did not require a landscape plan because the only condition was that the board is going to have to landscape around your home in a similar manner as to the rest of the development. But your permit has been awaiting payment for a couple of months now.
Yeah, I got that. So, the only thing that's not quite the disconnect here, Susan, is that you handed me the guidelines and said I got to prepare a landscape plan that meets your guidelines.
I'm sorry, perhaps if we can talk after the meeting, because this is not the point of this public hearing for this variance, and I'll be happy to discuss this with you at another time.
Well, I would direct this to the planning commission then, because I think my home site does pertain to this.
Well, we're the applicant is the HOA, and
Gotcha.
that's the issue that we're going to discuss here tonight. So you guys can connect tomorrow about your particular property and how it's affected, but the HOA owns the land there, and they're the applicant, so they're the ones that we're going to be addressing with this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, absolutely. Anyone else wishing to be heard on this matter?
My name is Kurt Weiser, a resident at 142 Lake Mountain Drive, and I've been a resident there since May of 2018. It's my understanding that this plan has been under consideration for a couple years, and I think the main thing is that I think the board has the authority to pass this plan. It's a prudent plan. It's not going to cost the homeowners any money. It's going to upgrade irrigation. And I think the process that was gone through to accomplish this was the appropriate one. And that when there was a concern raised by homeowners, then it was brought then to a very quick vote. And the association agreed that this was a good plan and that the process was appropriate and was passed, I think, 19-10. And so my understanding is that it's not going to cost us any money because of the rebates from SNWA and the reserves that we have, and it's a prudent way to move forward. I live on Lake Mountain Drive. I've got all that grass in front of my house, and I think there's a lot of sentiment on the board and in the community that if we can keep that grass, we'd like to. This is just phase one. It's just behind the garages. When you drive by Lake Mountain, anybody else won't even notice a difference. So I'd recommend that you approve this variance.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be? Yes, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Judith Barnes. I live at 144 Tumbleweed in Boulder Landing Village. And I'm on the landscape committee for Boulder Landing Village. And we've been working on this plan for over 3 years. And we have 20,515 square feet of turf. You drive down Lake Mountain, It's a beautiful community. You see all the grass. It's lovely. You go on the bike path, you see all the grass. It's lovely. Phase one, we have 25-year-old irrigation. It needs to be replaced. 29 units, we don't have that much money to help offset the cost to do that. So we're taking advantage of the Southern Nevada Water Authority to utilize that money to help update the old bushes and irrigation system. And after doing phase one, it's only going to take 1/3 of the turf away. Out of the 20,515 square feet as measured by Southern Nevada Water Authority, we're going to have almost 13,000 square feet of grass left for 29 units. And I think we're doing the prudent thing to do, taking advantage to help offset the cost for a small community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that public hearing. We'll bring it around the dais for discussion. Questions, comments, concerns?
I'd just like to express, I really actually applaud the association for doing this. I think it is the smart thing to do. The fact that we have Boulder City has a code that is archaic and isn't current is really demands an update. I probably am somewhat also very, this is sensitive to me because as the president of the Lake Meadview Estates HOA, I also have initiated and we are in the process of going to change the front end landscaping. There are also other HOAs within Boulder City that have also done it. So I guess I have to just say I support it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to echo those comments almost verbatim because as the president of the association that I'm in, we're talking about the exact same thing. We're moving grass in our association, taking advantage of the Southern Nevada Water Authority credit, and so we'll be moving forward with a pretty massive landscape remodel plan, probably sometime in 2021 to 2022, somewhere in that neighborhood. I was reading through the packet, and there was comments somewhere here, and I'd have to look for it, but comments in here about taking out vegetation to replace landscaping, irrigation lines. And I can tell you after consulting with our landscape architect, our irrigation lines are weaved through the roots of the shrubs in there, and you can't pull the landscaping lines out and replace it without destroying those shrubs, so I can see why that might be an issue. Sometimes you can save it, definitely not all the time. So those are my comments.
Cool. I'm going to echo the same thing because our board has the same problem. I just want, in retrospect, I just want to say that our association, we had to, because of these rules, we had to decorate Quartzsite Road that none of us can even see in our association, but that was the rules in order to do this. Our water bill is about $10,000 a year. I think it's criminal that we're sucking that kind of water out just to pay for plants that people drive by so fast they don't even see what's growing there. So I'm glad we're going to get this landscape thing changed because it is living in the desert. It doesn't make sense to be planting all the grass and the trees and stuff like that. So I'm in agreement with everybody else.
Absolutely. And the only final comments that I will make is I'm not a board member of any HOA, but there's a reason that the agency is paying top dollar, almost covering the cost completely to have this done. That's not like any other government agency. Normally they nickel and dime us. So it means it's really important to our community, not just here locally with Lake Mead, but Southern Nevada and our western region as well. So I think it's on us to do our part, and I refuse to be an agency to stand in the way. So I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve with Oh, I'm sorry. It is on.
There you go. I've got a motion.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item number 3 for possible action, variance V-19-643999 Adams Boulevard, Boulder City Hospital. Susan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For this request, the applicant owns the medical office building at the northwest corner of Adams and Buchanan, and the site cannot actually be accessed directly from those streets. It's accessed from a private driveway to the east, which on the county maps will show up as Medical Park Drive, even though that is not actually a recorded street at this time. The recorded portion of Medical Park Drive is further to the south. Nonetheless, this property is accessed from that private drive, and in the hospital zone, it actually, for sign purposes, deems that as a street frontage. The subject of the variance request is to replace the existing, Holly, if you could, freestanding sign at the corner here, which is quite small. It's only 16 square feet, because back when that building was built, that's all the code allowed. It allowed only 16 square foot maximum freestanding sign for a property, and a similar size sign for the building, not per tenant, for the whole building. So the applicant's proposal is to replace this small sign with a much larger sign. It requires a variance because the code only allows a maximum of 32 square foot area and 6 feet in height above grade. This will be 65 square feet in area, a little more than double than that, and 10 feet in height above grade. The plans that you have in your file also show that another sign is going to be a much smaller sign that does comply with code, will be provided at that entry to the site off of what is shown there as Medical Park Drive. But that one conforms to code, and likewise, the 2 proposed signs on the building will conform to code. As the report notes, the hospital zone has always had more restrictive sign requirements than commercial zones. And I wasn't here when that zone was created. We can just assume the premise is that these types of businesses would not require the same type of signage as commercial businesses would. One assumes that for medical uses, they're not necessarily looking to attract drive-by customers. Usually people coming to a medical facility are doing so because they have an appointment and it's already a destination, and signs normally serve a purpose for simply identifying the location. And apparently with the original restrictive sign code requirements, it was presumably deemed that all they needed was just a small sign to advertise an address and maybe a building name or something like that. Per the code that is excerpted in the staff report, properties in the H zone are entitled to 1 advertising structure per street frontage, and per the code, that Medical Park Drive counts as a street frontage. So this is actually the only property in the hospital zone that has 3 street frontages, of which 2 are on major roads. When you look at the other location map in the property, you can see there are other vacant lots in the hospital zone. Some of them also have 3 frontages, but only with frontage on 1 major street. This is the only site that does have frontage on 2. So per the code, this property would actually be entitled to 3 separate freestanding signs of 32 square feet each for a total of 96 square feet. And instead, what the applicant is proposing is 2 signs for a total of 89 square feet. But the individual sign will exceed code requirements for both area and height. There are currently no permanent signs on the building, and the current proposal is 1 permanent sign on the front and rear of the building, and the applicant's agent indicated that the 3 banners will be removed once the new signs are installed. However, the staff report notes that once the larger monument sign, if this does get approved, it doesn't prevent the owner from putting more signs in the building is allowed by code. And what would be allowed by code is 50 square feet per tenant space on the primary facade and the equivalent of 14 square feet per tenant on a secondary facade. There are 8 suites in this building, although at this point, the written statement is that that's not the intent of the owner, but it's just pointed out that there is the possibility for that. The staff report analyzes the 5 criteria for the Planning Commission to consider in approving a variance, including prior sign requests, which have been, either approved or denied in this zone. There are a couple of recommended conditions at the end, and staff would actually recommend adding a third. The first condition is the standard condition that if the commission chooses to approve this, it's based on the information they're submitting to you. So there could be no changes that would result in anything that would go beyond the scope of what was advertised. The second recommended condition is that no other freestanding signs would be permitted on the property if this one is approved. And a third recommended condition is that although the code prohibits off-premise signage and off-premise messages being displayed on signs, a third recommended condition adds to that by stating the monument sign shall not be used by off-site businesses, but that also signs for uses on properties under the same ownership are on-site messages. This site is owned by the hospital, so it's been determined that in addition to advertising the tenants within this building, it could legally also display messages of the hospital as long as those properties are under the same ownership. But if this property reverts to a different owner, and it was originally built and owned by another party, the sign here could not display messages for the hospital in that case.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I want to start off and ask about some more of kind of that ownership. We talked about the private drive, Medical Park Drive. Who's the owner? You said that that's a private drive.
I believe, actually, let me see if the map in the packet shows property lines. Actually, unfortunately, I don't have the county parcel line map. I believe the driveway is on the hospital property.
So it is hospital-owned, and the hospital then owns this plot of land, this park, and this building that we're discussing for signs as well.
Yeah,
So it's coming off their own privately owned driveway.
Correct.
Just for clarification on that.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I just confirmed it. It is, Medical Park Drive is owned by the hospital.
Okay, perfect. On the line there. And then I've got a bunch of questions for the applicant. So anything for staff, though, before we open it up and invite them.
Yes, I have a question. If, when we consider the variance, is it also possible that if we felt that one of the signs, for example, is in question or doesn't seem appropriate, can the variance also just be, condition be applied to only approve certain ones, or does it have to apply to all 5?
I'm sorry?
The only sign we're discussing is the large one, the variance. The other ones all comply as proposed. So it's just the one large one on the corner.
Okay, I am sorry.
No worries.
Misunderstood.
No other questions for staff at this time. We'll invite the applicant up in their presentation.
Good evening, Tom Meyer, CEO of Boulder City Hospital. The genesis of this sign was pursuant to our plans for building a virtual and real multi-specialty clinic. You saw the sign, it says Boulder City Primary Care. We've added to primary care services here in Boulder City being a medically underserved area and a health services professional shortage area as well. At the Critical Access Hospital, this has allowed us to open up a rural health clinic, which makes payer sources like Medicaid a preferred payer source, unlike other private clinics who don't take Medicaid. or limit very much their Medicaid patient volume. We've been building out the suites of the 999 building to accommodate a larger clinic. We have hopes to build an additional medical office building in the lot adjacent to where we are. Our architect suggested this type of sign as a way to direct people to the parking lot in front of the 999 building, as opposed to creating any confusion for them to come into the main hospital parking lot. Because we're talking about virtual and real multi-specialty clinic, we're going to have suites available for telemedical consults, which in our strategic partnership with the Valley Health System, we are in the process of recruiting additional specialties to the clinic, hopefully getting them there in person, but if not, then we'll have clinic space, consult space specifically for maybe hour or 2 hour blocks during a day or a week for other specialists like pediatrics, oncology, cardiac, and so forth. We would like to be able to, the reason why we want this sign is that we would like to be able to advertise the new specialties that we're bringing on board. And because it might change periodically, and we'll have a complex schedule of tenancy, this sign would allow us to provide that kind of direction for people who are looking for us. We also anticipate that this sign will be big enough as we add on to the space on our campus for the second medical office building.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Please, Koki, start.
The reason you want the digital sign in this size is so that anybody at that four-way stop sign there can see it, and you're going to, that a digital sign that'll be changed all the time?
It'll be changed, it'll be programmed to change when we get additional specialties there to talk about our business hours, if any other services of the hospital, and potentially events such as the Heart of the Community gala event or Advertising Art in the Park, our two main fundraising events. It would only be for those hospital and hospital-related services and activities.
I have a question. Can you confirm whether or not there's going to be actual streaming video, or if it's going to be still images, slideshow?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Our sign expert over here can tell you about the technical abilities of the sign. We anticipate that it's going to be scrolling information about the services, specialties, hours of the hospital, and so forth. We do not anticipate flashing images and things like that. It's strictly supposed to be informational. But
okay, go ahead.
Josh Hunter, 1512 Shadow Haven Lane, Las Vegas. It's a fancy sign, but what we're going to do is give them the capability to program it so the images will fade in and fade out only. No rolling video, no flashing, nothing extravagant. And it can be programmed to the extent of dimming in the evening, even more so than a normal dim. And also we can have a black background copy or black background images with white copy to even diminish the light more so in the evening hours if it is a problem. So to answer your question, yeah, it's not going to be going crazy. It's just going to be nice and fade in and fade out.
Got it.
Still just.
I have a question. Will you be able to have like the doctor's space on there? I mean, that's just for a general question for myself. Is it the sign will be able to put a person, just like I see there, it'll be able to do that?
Yeah, it's a pretty picture here, but they can put on there, it's a high resolution LED display. So it will be able to show a doctor's face very clearly with a name underneath it and almost, any kind of photograph of high resolution on there. So yes.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is the intent for the information that's going to be on this sign only going to be for the primary care facility, or will it also include the hospital?
it could also include the hospital services. Hospital services of the hospital for the community, like our flu shots, health fair, educational programs that we offer at the hospital from time to time, And then, of course, most importantly, we believe, is advertising the services to the community of new specialties. Every 3 years, we do a community health needs assessment. And since 2006, when I started actually I started in 2007, time and time again, the most important and the biggest need articulated by the community is the need for increased access for additional specialties, and the need for lower cost services in terms of us being able to get more contracts with HMOs and other organization payer sources that we have not been a preferred provider for. So as we build this clinic, which has been a long time coming and a very difficult process for us to generate the capital to produce, it's very important for us to generate more and more patient volume through those services, addressing the need, decreasing out migration of patients to services in the metropolitan Clark County area, and generate more same-store referrals to our ancillary services to make sure that we remain viable and grow to meet the needs of the community and our visitors every year. Long-winded answer, sorry.
So you're really speaking to the primary care facility is what you really want to
That's our predominant focus, is to generate the primary care.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, actually, if I may butt in a little, I have one extra recommended condition based on a reminder from what the applicant said. As the staff report noted, that we made an interpretation that this sign, because they indicated it would have static messages, and that is part of the approval that your approval would be based on, is that static messages only that would fade in and out. But nonetheless, for the sake of the public or whoever might be reading the minutes after the fact, it would be prudent to have a fourth condition, which would state the messages on the sign shall not rotate, gyrate, blink, flash, or move, per the code prohibition on that standard.
I would like to see it just say that it mirrors the current code, because if they change the code, then that gives them the leeway rather than restricting the flashing here. Just restrict it to whatever the current code says. So work on verbiage on that one. By the time we're done, we'll circle back around. My questions, comments, concerns, everything here. First, I saw our certification on the light, and my only concern there is that it says in the footnotes here, calculations were taken on an overall height of a 6-foot sign, but we're requesting a 10-foot sign. So what does the actual numbers look like? Because our charts are based off of the calculations of a 6-foot sign versus a 10-foot sign, which is being requested.
The message unit is basically at, let's see here, so we're at 6'9" minus 5 inches, so the message unit is just above 6 foot.
So it's based on the message unit board there.
Exactly, because
Okay,
this
perfect.
part of the sign does not, this is just a backlit panel on top, so those letters glow nice and blue, and that heart will be red, but the message unit is approximately 6 feet.
So we've got our brightness certification letter, but if you wouldn't mind, for the value of the public, kind of talk the impact, because probably in our community, and as you're aware of the hospital, you know, we're not a well-lit area, and so this would have an impact. If you wouldn't mind explain that.
Well, unfortunately, I got this today from our vendor, and it's just a little bit skewed because the proposed sign, if you look on the site map, it's at an angle. It's just on an angle here. So rather than being facing north exactly, if we just move those numbers just a little bit to my left, if I'm looking at it. So
it's more of a splice at a 45-degree angle through the intersection.
Just about,
so
exactly. Yeah. So these numbers on here are kind of, they're foot candle lumen numbers. So they're kind of showing you where it's at 150 feet and then 300 feet out. So any impact really would be for maybe that residential to the west or even the northwest across the intersection, and maybe a little bit, but that house on the north across is at an angle, so they're not going to really get anything. And these lumen numbers, these numbers are so minimal I know you have the letter there, but it basically is saying that it's in the evening times or even, and the sign itself is set to not exceed 0.03 foot candles measured at a distance of 150 square feet. So 0.3 or 0.03 foot candles. And I didn't really know what a foot candle was until I started working in the sign business. And a foot candle is the way the light looks at a foot. If you're holding a candle, it's how it looks a foot away from you. So 0.3 at 150 feet is pretty minimal. It's not very bright at all. These numbers that are shown on this representation here, they're also kind of the high end of the spectrum. So they're showing you a bright white screen rather than what's actually going to be on the screen, which would probably be a picture of a doctor or some hours or an event coming up with maybe a black background or a dark background with some lighter copy. So it's very readable in the evening. And what that means is that it's going to be about 25 to 35% of these numbers that are represented on here. So it's going to be even less bright.
Back there.
And so the final point that I want to make on this little representation is it's about 4%. In the last sentence of that first paragraph in the letter, it says it's about 4% of what a typical street light is. And if you look on that, I think I added some photos that I put in there. There's a 3-prong street light on Adams. And then there's two-prong ones on the other side of the intersection. So those lights, even that ambient light, is going to diminish the effect of the light going across into the neighbors' backyards or bedroom windows or whatever. So it should have a very minimal, unobtrusive effect on that intersection, other than cars going through, seeing it at that 6-foot level, being able to read what's going on in the building. And that's the entire goal, is to kind of educate the community on what's in there. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
No, that's perfect on that one. My next question here for Tom is recouping the cost. This can't be a cheap sign. Are you looking to charge for advertising on the third-party doctors coming in, or is this something strictly the hospital's going to control across the board?
Hospital's going to control that all the way. Actually, I think with a little bit, what we try to generate for the doctors. A doctor in Las Vegas incurs a significant opportunity cost leaving their practice, their busy practice, to come out to Boulder City. We don't have the critical mass of patients that make it worth their while. So we tell them up front that we're trying to generate referrals to their clinics through our clinic service. So if we can do that, not only with the patient consults for primary care, but by also advertising their name and their practice and their presence at Boulder City Hospital campus, that helps us in our recruiting efforts.
Absolutely, but we're walking a thin line of advertising their Las Vegas practice and off-site advertising within Boulder City limits, which is prohibited. And so I just wanted to make it clear that if the hospital is producing the message, not charging anything, they're not in the advertising business. That's just a benefit of them doing business here locally.
You're correct, and yeah, I'd like to just embellish a little, not embellish, but clarify a little bit. The benefit to the hospital is that when those doctors come out to our facility and they book same-day surgery, or they book any kind of consult, that is a service that's provided through our ancillary departments. Hospital is receiving that benefit. We're billing and collecting for that service. The doctors, all doctors, because we don't employ any doctors, we employ the mid-levels, the nurse practitioners and the PAs, but all of the doctors are just ally or part of our medical staff, and we're not agents or employees or whatever you always hear from the UHS commercials. We don't employ them, only the mid-levels. So advertising their presence on the Boulder City Hospital campus, it is still their practice, but it's a practice that's part of the medical staff of Boulder City Hospital.
Absolutely, yes. No, that's perfect. And then a point of clarification, you just kind of scraped it briefly. There's an adjacent property next to that you guys, I assume, own because you talked that you have plans to develop. Is this sign then, can we rope it in a condition to do that? Because I don't want to see a same size sign further down because it's still going to be on a main frontage road. Is that something you guys would entertain to have this be an end all be all bigger at that corner there?
Yeah, and again, that was the reason why our architect envisioned a large sign, because we want to build another hospital, another building of a similar size to add to this virtual and real multi-specialty practice. So the next building will actually be part of the same complex, the same service line. So with more consult rooms, with more suites, with more doctors and services, we wanted a big sign that we could rotate some of these different services as they occur.
Absolutely. It doesn't make sense to dump $250,000 today, tear it down in 5 years, and throw up another one. Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, just one quick one. Should these other buildings be built, would they also contain the same Boulder Care at the top of the building like this one does?
Yeah, that's just part of our branding, just to keep the campus together.
It'll be the same thing then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if we've got nothing else, thank you very much. We'll bring it around for the dais here. I've got a public hearing. I will go ahead and open it up. It's the official public hearing. Anyone wishing to be heard on this matter? Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that public hearing. Bring it around for questions, comments, discussion across here.
I just want to say I think it's a great sign. I think it'll be great to educate the community with, and myself, I'm for putting the sign up. I think it'll be a great educational tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I saw the sign and I thought it was very fitting. I went on Google Maps and got down to the street view level and looked at every hospital I could think of, and I saw similar signage in Henderson and Vegas. Didn't seem like it was out of line, so I'm in favor of this. Susan and Michael, did you figure out the wording on that?
Yeah, the fourth condition can be the messages on the sign shall not rotate, gyrate, blink, flash, or move per current code requirements unless the code is amended to allow such movement.
Perfect.
Sure, that'll suffice right there. That way they don't have to come back if things change and we update our sign code there. Any questions, comments?
Well, the only question I had is, you talked the fourth condition. Is that, do I presume we also have that third condition that prohibits future signs to be,
The third condition was the monument sign shall not be used by off-site businesses. Signs for uses on properties under the same ownership are on-site messages.
okay, so that's what they.
And that really protects us if they needed to
So they're-
liquidate in the
that's the
future.
third
Absolutely.
condition, okay.
Yeah. Perfect. And the only thing that I wanted just to reiterate, just we spoke earlier this week, is just that point in there in that condition is no off-site advertising thing. This sign is going to be great for the community, and we look forward to the future services that you guys are able to bring to the community. So I'll entertain a motion at this point.
I'll make a motion to approve V 19643 and staff's findings
The four conditions.
And conditions, yeah.
and conditions.
I'll second that.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Item number 4, monthly progress report.
No comment.
Wonderful. Item number 5, final public comment. Anyone wishing to speak during the final public comment? Hearing and seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the final public comment. Meeting adjourned.